what happens now that all of these Frankensteining wires everywhere, what's going on with this? Let's see if we can get this to work. Hey everybody, today we are going to be trying to fix Grant's phone. Grant is from Flower Mound, Texas. Let's take a look at his phone. Pretty beat up. Now I've been working on this for a while and I want to catch you up and you're going to join me for the rest of this repair. So what Grant says is, he says, phone has a bend in it from being sat on. And permission to record repair for YouTube. Thumbs up. All right, thanks, Grant. We will let you see what's going on with your phone. So I think he's right. That is a bent phone. Bend is a unfortunate problem, and we can see kind of the bend right here was right where the logic board goes. So right there, right in the middle of the phone. That's really unfortunate. And the first thing that we did was we determined that Grant's phone had a short circuit. So we worked on this as part of practical board repair school, and we used it as an example of a short circuit, and we figured out where the short was, which was in an unusual spot. So what we did first was we separated the two halves of the logic board. So we desoldered the logic board, separating the bottom layer from the data containing top layer. So Grant is really hoping to get his data off of this phone. And what we found is that the short circuit was not in the bottom RF layer. So that's too bad, because if the short was in there, we could just get the data off of the top board. That wasn't the case. So the short circuit was in the top board. And we used the thermal camera looking everywhere to see where the short circuit might be. And guess what? We found that the short was actually within the power management chip. Now the power management chip is a really challenging chip. So on the last day of the course, we showed the students how to remove an underfilled chip. And I made a video about it as well, which you can go look up on the channel. It's called Jessa's Blast Off Method for Removing Underfilled ICs. That is the technique that I use to take off this power management chip. And we can use our multimeter right now and find that we no longer have a main short. So here we are with Grant's phone. It had a main short from being sat on, and there was a little crack right in the PMU, and now we can measure the main power rail right here and see that the main power rail no longer has a short to ground. So we have cured the problem, but we're not going to be able to boot up the phone and get it to decrypt the data unless we get a new power management chip back on here. And that's where I wanted to pick up with you guys how to put a chip back on if you've taken it off in an area like this where it was underfilled. So what have I done so far? I've prepped the board. So what does that look like? I've prepped the board by using copper braid and cleaning up all of the remaining solder that was on these pads. And then I've gone around and I've cleared out the underfill with 200-degree hair dryer heat. So I've cleaned up all of that underfill to make this just a regular blank spot that a new chip can fit on. So here is a fresh new one. Fresh new iPhone 13 Pro PMU. Oh wow, look at that. There's an Apple logo on this chip. These chips, wow, that is insane. This is crazy. It was really hard for me to get this chip. And now I realize why. I didn't think about this until right in this moment. Hey Brad, guess why I couldn't find that chip at the regular places? Because of an Apple logo. Yeah, so this is just marker covering up Apple logo so that you can import it. That is just, that's too far. You know, you've gone too far with repair restrictions when you can't replace a power chip on a device with the same power chip from a different device because of logo infringement. That's just crazy. So let's see. Now I'm going to be mad if it makes it so that I'm not able to see the orientation mark on here. Hopefully it won't. All right, that marker is is winning the battle against my Q-tip with alcohol. So I'm not going to be able to scrape that off. All right. There's the little tiny dot. Let me see if I can zoom. It's right now in the bottom right corner. See the little teeny tiny dot in the corner? It's important to pay attention to that guy because that marks the A1 position of our chip, and we're going to make sure that we put that dot, that corner of the chip, is in the A1 pad. All right, now let's see if we can figure out what type of solder is on the bottom of this chip in all of these little balls. So let's see if we can just look at it and see whether or not it looks like it has been reballed already, and if so, with what. So because this chip is an Apple logo chip, the only way for us to order one and buy one is that guy had to go get one from either a strip of them laying around China somewhere or harvest it off of a different working phone. So we don't really know where these come from, but they look really nice and cleaned up and they work. So let's find out if the alloy that's on this chip is a nice low melt alloy that would be perfect to go on Grant's phone for data recovery. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to set my hot air on something that is pretty low, that would be like too low. I'm going to set it at, I mean, this is not calibrated, it's kind of a made up number, but I'm going to set it at 180 degrees and see whether or not the balls that are on here, will they readily melt at 180 degrees of hot air. And if so, that means they are likely 138 alloy. And if not, then they are likely something else. So let's see. Do these solder balls melt at 180 degrees? Nope. Nope, not really. Oh, look at the paint. The paint is, I'm like, why is everything turning black? The paint doesn't like heat. Ha! That is so funny. All right, well, let's see if we can, guess we can use a little flux and get rid of the paint that was on the back of this chip. All right, so the alloy that's on here is not 138, which is the low melt. Hey, there's our little Apple logo. God, can you imagine if you know, like how hard it would be to work at Customs and Border Patrol, where you've got to save our country against the importation of authentic, made for iPhone, you know, original branded chips. It's not like that. That's just so insane, the idea that you have to worry about getting sued by Apple for even having a replacement power management chip, a repair that they will never do in a million years. They would throw Grant's board away if Grant went down there and said, I'm begging for my data. I made a mistake. I sat down and my phone was there. It's already a bad day. I'm already hating life right now. And my data is trapped on this phone. And thank God I can send it to people like iPad Rehab or anybody that we've trained or anybody that has learned how to do this stuff on their own, and that they can access chips that can replace my cracked power management chip. And yet, no, you got to go one step further and try to sue people and make them have to put paint on the chips. So oh my gosh, that's over the top. Come on, Apple, come on. Come on. All right, so we're going to have to reball this chip. We don't have to. We could install this chip right now, but we're going to choose to reball this chip so that we can reball it with 138, the lowest low melt alloy, because we're installing this chip in a position that is right next to the CPU. So we're going to install it with low melt alloy and kind of a low amount of heat so that we can get that chip to really melt the solder and sit down there without bothering the underfilled CPU. So let's go for that. All right, let me see if I can make it have a little bit of contrast by doing this job on a paper towel. Okay, let's go ahead and delete these balls. All right, now we're going to grab a stencil and see if we can reball this chip. Everything that we use is available at iPadRehab.com in our supply store. If you click iPadRehab.com and then click supply, you could search for stencils and find this stencil. You can find our special tweezers, the solder paste, and anything that you see us using in any of these videos. All right, let's make some balls. There we go. All right, the balls look nice and even. I looked at it on all sides on an angle, and now we're ready to line up that dot at the A1 position and solder this chip onto Grant's board and see if that's his only problem. See if we can get his phone to boot up. And we're gonna see if we can solder it right back on. All right, let's finish with the imperceptible nudge. All right, the chip is cooled down, and now we're going to test with a multimeter. Whenever I put on a PMU, the way I test it before I do anything else, before I apply any power to the board, is I make sure with my multimeter that I don't have a main short from the PMU placement. So main is going to feed into the PMU in so many spots that if there's any kind of blob under there, something didn't go right, then it will usually show up as a main short with a multimeter. So let's check into that. It is also 0.4. Okay, so 0.4 must be normal, and we're going to call this a success. So the power management chip is on there with no shorts to main, which means it's seated down and everything's fine. So for the next step, we're going to go ahead and apply DC power. Connected. That's not good. Oh my gosh. When I'm plugging in the charge port to try to boot the phone and looking under the microscope, I see wiggle, wiggle motion that shouldn't be there. Oh, this is not good. And now I'm looking right here. Look at that. Deal breaker. Bad news. That looks like, oh no, man. Oh God. This is a full length crack. Crack, crack. Crack, crack. That's bad. That's really bad. That is bad. Oh, I probably should have given this board an inspection and seen that before. Right there. Oh, look at that. It goes through the entire, this entire thing here. Ah, not good. This is bad news. Do you see that right there on from one side of the board all the way to the other is a full length crack right there. Giant crater that goes, that means this edge of this end of the board is not attached at all. It's a multi-lit. Oh my gosh, look at that. Look at that. That is a full length crack. I mean, it's the same as just snapping that off. That is not good. That's not good. I think that, I'm trying to think, is there any way to overcome what is on here? This guy is a charge IC. These are some charge coils, which we could, this is some kind of boost IC under there. We could just snap this end off. I mean, this board is gonna have to get recoded for a CPU transplant anyway, so that is quite unfortunate. However, as long as the CPU isn't cracked and the NAND isn't cracked, and the EEPROM, which appears to be fine, as long as those are the three vital chips, the data containing EEPROM, NAND, and the CPU, we can transfer those to a receiver board, which would mean requoting poor Grant for a bigger surgery. So that's what's going to happen to this. So for fun, let's see what happens. I mean, we can prompt this to boot, but I don't think, I would be surprised if it was able to communicate if it has enough things that are not torn through there. But what I would like to do, thinking out loud, is snap the end of this board off, get rid of the charge IC, get rid of everything in this corner, and then just see if we could apply a main voltage ourselves and ask if the PMU is okay, at least, so that we could know. And I think that might be possible. That would be fun to try, wouldn't it? All right, let's see. Okay, let's give this a try. This is insane. I think that this board is actually potentially alive. And here's why I think this. That's a complete fracture. The board itself is fractured, which means that most of the board is okay, except for the place where we connect the battery to the board, the battery connector. And then what's under here, which is a boost IC, and I'm not sure what exactly it's for because there's no schematic for the 13 Pro, and I haven't had to work in that area. On the other side of the board right here on this little tail, this little tiny little tail for this guy, on the other side is the charge IC. And the charge IC's job is to create the main power rail from the battery. And the next thing that happens is the main power rail gets delivered to the PMU that I just put on. And one of the things the PMU does before anything else is it creates a power rail called 1V8 always that goes out here to the power button. Now let's see if I can show you that there actually is power being delivered to that power button. So let me give that a try. That is too tiny for me. There we go. Look, there it is. There it is. See it? See it? Do you see it? Holy crap, man! This is actually working right now, despite the full fracture in the board. That's insane. So now I'm going to ask it to boot by USB, and you guys can watch up there and see what happens. I doubt it's going to be able to do anything by USB, but I don't know. I've been consistently surprised. All right, so USB says it's not doing anything. I'm going to disconnect, and we see no current consumption. So prompting to boot by USB, which is asking that USB connection system to detect the charger, that's not working. All right, but let's ask, can it boot from the power button itself? So the power button with that 1.8 volts there, I'm going to now pull that to ground just by touching my tweezers in there. Some action. Oh, can you see some action? We see a little bit of action. That 100. Oh, it's moving. It's going. Don't do it. Hold your breath. This phone is booting. Look at that. There is no way that the phone can consume this current through the battery connector, through the broken board, without the PMU being alive. So yay for us. PMU job is a success. Replacing the underfilled PMU worked. If only Grant hadn't sat on the board so that it broke its tail, little tailbone fracture. All right, so it's, I think, too much to ask that we'll actually be able to see image, but let's throw a screen on it just to rule out. And we definitely won't have any charge port activity, so we won't be able to extract the data off of this phone through the charge port. And I don't see any way for us to fix that other than take the CPU to a receiver board. But let's just see for fun, because we have no USB activity. But let's just see. And we can't fix it, because we know why we have no USB activity, because this board is fractured. Okay, so now we have a screen on that. Let's just try once again. Does this thing have enough image lines left to show us image? Probably not. So boot, prompt. And now we see that 110 milliamps. And the phone is booting. Once again, the phone is booting. It's chilling here at 120. It's confused. It's waking up after a long night's sleep. All right, so there's no display. So not a huge shock, not a surprise that the phone, no USB, no display. That's unfortunate. And we can see, though, on our DC power that this phone is booting up. That is a normal boot up current consumption for iPhone 13 Pro. But we can't see anything on the screen. We can't plug it into a computer. So, there's that. At least we know that the PMU replacement worked out just fine. However, there's not enough for us to go on. All right, so for this guy, I think we're gonna say PMU replacement is a success. However, we're gonna need to go further to actually get this thing to decrypt the data, accept the passcode, and present the data to us. I'm surprised. Part of me kind of wants to diode mode in the connector and see if there's anything that we could close and open to just get the CPU to talk to image. I also think it probably doesn't hurt to just break the end of this off. Let's do that as our exciting finale here. That is so bad. Yeah, look at that. There's nothing left. Rip. Now I want to look up where the image stuff is. The OFG is just really cool. I just want to see it have image. And that's got to be image stuff there. And that guy. All right, let's solder a wire and see. I'm curious now whether or not it can do the exact same thing with, can we still see DC power? If we snap the end of the board off where the battery connector goes. I'm curious. I'm going to do it. Let's go for it. And let's look for main power rail. Probably this. All right, where's a good spot for us to solder a wire to that would be kind of stable? So we're missing all of this. Let's go right here and stick a wire on that guy. I just love my little PMU so much. I feel like he should have a chance at life. And that is right around here. We got these guys and that guy. Let's stick a wire on the end of that guy and inject our own main power rail. Okay, wire soldered to main. What do you think is going to happen, Brad? Can you boot a phone just by injecting into main, even though a piece of the phone, the piece of the logic board is chilling? It's completely broken off.
As long as that piece of
Right. Now I'm going to check with my multimeter and see if I have my trigger voltage sitting at my power pin or not. Let's find out. All right, let's trigger. Prompt to boot. Looks like it's chilling at 110 milliamps. And now, action! It's working! That's pretty crazy. Look, you can get the same. That's really wild. Let's take a look. We're getting the exact same current pattern, which appears to be booting up, even though we have a piece of the board completely separated. That is where you plug in the battery. That's wild. Man, I would like to bring back image on this. Is it worth it to diode mode in the connector and just see if we can figure out where, where has image gone wrong? It's hard to imagine that we'll be able to bring back image when the very edge of this is where you plug in the screen and it's completely severed right there. Let's put some more time into the phone that is broken in half. So this phone boots on DC power when we inject, not through the battery connector since that's ripped off, but when we solder a wire over here onto the main power rail and inject our own main power rail. Then on DC power, we can see this phone booting up, but it has no image. And that's not much of a surprise because the break, the fracture in the board is right here at the edge of where we plug in the screen, the image connector. So I started taking resistance measurements. So I did diode mode in the connector to try to figure out if there were just maybe a few lines that we could patch back up, just because I think it would be fun to see this phone actually boot up, given that it has had its blast off method PMU replacement, plus its, completely severed battery connector and USB connection area, and now it just needs image. So let's keep going and see what we can do. I've already soldered a wire to bring back our normal resistance to ground here on this line, and we can follow that wire, goes all the way over and connects to the rest of its circuitry. Now the 13 Pro doesn't have a schematic, so we can just guess what these components are doing. So this, my guess, is similar to the Chestnut chip in earlier models. This looks like it is a display boost power IC. So we've got a line coming from that area to the connector here and here. So here's a second jumper that comes all the way over to there, and that restores, it closes the line for another open line over here. And then we're down to one left, and this one's interesting. So one left is diode mode, I forget. Let's look it up. Okay, so here is our diode mode. So I fixed this connection, and I fixed, I think, this one. Is that the one that was over there? Yeah, that's the one that I did the other jumper for. And what's left is right here. So what we're getting on pin 4 is, let's find out. It's supposed to be 0.5, and our diode mode reading right now, fourth pin, 1, 2, 3, 4. Instead of 0.5, we're getting 0.2. So something's up. We're not getting the normal resistance to ground. So let's investigate that and see if we can figure out what does it do. So let's go back to ZXW, which is our only information. This is just the board view, just how things are connected together, but they don't have any names. So in the 13 Pro, because the schematic never made it off of it never fell off a truck in China, it never made its way to the internet, these circuits are just named ZXW5, ZXW11. So ZXW11 circuit, let's see what we can make from it. So it arrives here at the connector with a resistance of 0.535 diode mode units. And it goes sort of, a capacitor is nearby. And then where does it come from? So let's flip the board and see that it goes back over here to the other side of the board. Now this area is broken. So let me show you what this area looks like on our board. Right here, completely broken off. So what do we have left? What we have left are these two little resistors, but they're probably go to somewhere that's broken off the board. We have this chip that's barely hanging on. We've got some caps, we've got this large coil, we've got this chip. So that's where we are. So let's compare that to ZXW and see how does this relate to our low resistance pin number 4. So let's check back. So we can see right here, those are the two resistors that we still have for some other line. And the line that is low goes to this large capacitor. And then let's see what goes on here. So this coil, L3387, is missing. It's not there. Pretty sure. Yeah, coil is gone. That ship has sailed. So that means we're going to have a problem with this line as it pertains to U6100. So let's try to figure out U6100. What does it do? What is this coil for? What's going on? And all we have is the pattern to look at. So we can't, there's no extra information. So just using our experience, we know that when a chip interacts with a coil, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to take a power line and buck convert it down to a lower output, or it's going to take a power line and boost it to a higher output. So we don't know which is going on here, but the likely case of L3387, which is gone, and U6100 is that they work together to either create a higher or lower power rail that then appears to go to the display. So we probably need that, and it may well have to do with image. So we don't have image, everything else seems to be back to normal as far as resistance to ground, except for this line. So let's see, could we possibly try to fix it? Let's try to guess how this chip actually works. So it's a really small chip where C1 and A1 are ground. And now let's just see what these other 4 are doing. Probably one is input and one is output, and one is sort of the path through the coil. So let's just click around and see if we can guess which is which. So let's click here, and B1. Now what is B1? Let's just try to guess from far away. B1 looks like it is main. So this is our main power rail. How do we know? Because of the pattern of the main power rail across the board, the way that it kind of wraps around and plugs into the PMU. All right, so this is main. So main goes to this U6100, and then let's click around and see the line that's missing is A2. This is probably the output because it goes out to a connector. All right, so input, output, and then let's see, this here, ZXW12 line, is going to be kind of like out and back through this coil. So this is likely main power comes in, and then within U6100, it switches it to ground through this coil, and then the output is A2. In fact, it might be easy to kind of compare this to like a backlight circuit in an iPhone 6, and you can click around and see these exact same things. So then how does the chip know when to actually take that main power rail and convert it into whatever its output is? It knows that from likely this guy. So C2 is probably a data input. So let's see. C2 is a line that goes back to the PMU. Does it go anywhere else? No. That is likely a data line. It's just some sort of ching, a 1 or a 0, and when it's a 1, this chip is going to get busy and it's going to make its output. So what can we do about this? We actually don't need that chip. We don't need that coil. All we need to do is to create the correct voltage on the output that's going to go out to that screen. But we don't know what that is. So our next goal is to try and figure it out. So how can we do that? What we could do is take a working iCloud lock board. So I've got a working board here, and we're going to just take a voltage reading on C33213. We're going to take a voltage reading on that output line and see what it is, and see if it's actually higher or lower than battery when the screen is connected and when we have image. So let's set that up. Here we've got our, this is the broken off part here. We've got our coil and we've got our big cap. And the way I think it's easiest for us to do this is to just move our red wire over and use the wire as a way to take that voltage. Here's what I mean. I'm going to take off our wire from here. I'm just going to borrow the same guy. And now we're going to bring it over to our working iCloud lock board, and we're going to go on the butt of this guy. Okay, so now I can just flip this board over and we can take that voltage reading right on the end of the wire. 1.2, let's see if it stays 1.2 all the time. And then when the screen display blanks, it's still 1.2, 1.243. All right, so now we've got an answer to our question. What is the output of U6100 that goes to our connector? And the answer is 1.2 volts. So let's see what happens if we just try to supply 1.2 volts ourselves. Will we be able to get image on the broken board? So let's set that up, solder a wire, and inject 1.2 volts just from a power supply. See what happens. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is put the wire that we use to inject main into our board. I'm going to return that to its spot. And now I need to get 1.2 volts right here. That might be too risky. I think I'm going to put 1.2 volts right where it goes, which is here on pin 4 of the display connectors. Let's zoom in on that. All right, so we can zoom in here, and we're going on this spot right here has to be able to deliver 1.2. Now, because the diode mode reading was 0.2 instead of 0.5, I'm just going to kind of skip that whole really broken area of the board and just try to deliver 1.2 right here at the connector. Okay, the wire is attached right there, super tiny. And the other end. And then I think I'm going to solder this right to the alligator clamp just so that I can be sure that it's actually attached. All right, my 1V2 wire is attached. And then I'm going to go to, I think I might solder a larger wire to ground just so that it's easier to grip this stuff. All right, now we've got a nice, easy to attach to ground. And let's try to make all these connections, see if we can make this happen. All right, I'm gonna try and get a video for you guys of what happens now that all of these Frankensteining wires everywhere, what's going on with this. Let's see if we can get this to work. Okay, so what do we have going on? We have right here, big red wire. This is soldered to the main power rail on Grant's board, and it is connected to DC power. I am now going to plug in the other side of that so that you guys can see DC power connected. Is there a short? No. All right, so we've got that connected. So right here, our DC power is sending that 4 volts into the board. Now for our DIY 1.24 volts. So we are guessing that U6100 and its missing coils job is to supply 1.24 volts to the display. So I've soldered a wire to right here. So this guy, red alligator clamp, is now doing that. Let me go ahead and disconnect so that I can plug the screen in. So screen needs to go in next. All right, screen is now plugged in. Main connected, no short. Now 1V2. So I'm going to connect that 1.2 volts over here with a separate DC power supply. So we've got 1, 2. All right, now I see some current flowing from the DC power supply into our 1.2 volt line, which makes sense. So we have made the connection. And now the last thing for us to do to test whether or not our PMU replacement and then severed board with our battery connector and our USB circuitry sitting right here completely cracked off. Will this boot up and produce image now that we've done all of these wires? So we've had to rebuild 3 or 4 wires. Will it actually show us an Apple logo? Let's find out. So I have to prompt it to boot with tweezers because we can't just plug in a charge port since our USB circuitry is just sitting right there. So how are we going to do that? I'm going to go to the power button. I'm going to find the trigger pin and I'm going to connect it to ground. And if it prompts, then we'll see that DC power supply right there, and it will fire up. Okay, so let's finally, moment of truth. So I've set this up a few times and every time something disconnected. So I'm going to try and just kind of hold this here and locate that power pin. And there it is. All right, so let's prompt to boot. Prompting to boot. Okay, I did it. I prompted it to boot, and now we're going to just look to see. Can we see? Oh my God, there it is. There's an Apple logo. It's working. We brought back image. Oh my God, I love ones like this. It is working. Will it boot up? I don't know, but I can't believe that we successfully brought back image with 3 different wires wrapped around the board. We're injecting our own 1.24 volts, and there we have our Apple logo. All right, let's see. What does this board do? But I'm thrilled with this. Oh my God, look at that. Our PMU replacement is vindicated, and we have this board booted with touch even. This is so great. Now we're still not going to be able to get the data off because we have no USB connection since the USB board is just sitting right here. All right, let me see what this guy's, but I'm thrilled with this. Yay! I can't believe that we got the broken iPhone 13 board to boot. There it is. All right, very good. I'm going to end this video. I love this. This is my favorite type of repair to do, where the 13 Pro has no schematic, and you just have to use your experience in detective work and logical reasoning. And these ones like this are my absolute favorite. Can you believe that? We made the broken board boot up with image after clearing a short from it being sat on. That's all right. Woohoo!